Talk to Michael Jacobs, political economy professor and former advisor to Gordon Brown when he was Chancellor and Prime Minister. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about inheritance tax now. I think there are lots of people who say, oh, it's an outrageous tax. You know, it's money that but it's already been taxed. People have a right to hand money on and work hard for their kids and hand it on. But also, the kids who pay the actual tax, usually adults by the time they get it, they haven't done the hard work to get it. You can argue this is the fairest tax going. Where do you stand on it?
Well, the main point to make about the inheritance tax is so few people pay it. So there's a lot of people who kind of don't like it in principle for reasons that you say, but then forget the fact that you have to have £1 million. If you've got two parents, they can give you £1 million worth of inheritance before it pays a penny. So that means, given that most of us don't have £1 million to pass on to our children, that less than 4% of all households pay it. Yeah, those 4% are some of the richest people.
Oh, but they're not, because the richest, we talked about this on the show, the richest people
Julia,
don't
I know what you're
pay
going to say. I know what you're going to say, but the very richest don't, because they can find ways of getting out of it. If you can invest in agricultural land, for example, you don't pay it. So
or you just set up a trust, and so everything goes via a trust. Yeah.
So the very richest, people like Rishi Sunak, for example, or Nadeem Zahawi, who curiously, despite having been had to resign as a cabinet minister because of irregularities in his tax affairs, is fronting the campaign to abolish inheritance tax. Not the person I would have put in front of that campaign. The very, very rich don't pay very much of it, but the people who do pay it are pretty rich, and it's less than 4% of us.
I think, I completely understand that. The trouble is, there's a level where, you know, a lot of people, I say maybe it might be the value of their home that's gone up, but they paid a big mortgage on that, and they'll say, I've worked very hard, I've done everything right. If I just spent it all, I wouldn't have been taxed at 40% on it. VAT's not at 40%. Everything else, I've already been taxed at 45% on that money before it's even, you know, I've been able to hand it on to my kids after I die. Why does it have to be taxed again? That's the feeling, isn't it? It's that feeling of unfairness, and that's why so many people are against this tax, even though the chance of them ever having to pay it or their kids paying it is virtually zero.
Two things I think to say about that. First is most of the wealth that people pass on comes from their homes. Mm-hmm. And of course, people's homes rise in value without being taxed. So it's not true that what people hand on is income which they've earned, which has been taxed. It's mostly the unearned wealth that the shortage of homes in this country mean that our homes rise in value every year without us doing anything, and that isn't taxed. So it really isn't the case that this is all double tax money.
All right.
The second thing to say is that, of course, the person leaving the money is not really taxed. It's the person receiving it. Yes. And again, that's a windfall. None of us earn this money, so it's not unfair to tax it. Okay. The question is, it raises £7 billion.
Well, how are you going to replace that money? We've only got a minute.
That's the question.
We've only got a minute and a half left, Michael. I want to ask you about what Gordon Brown, your former boss, had to say. Yeah. Saying countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Norway, they benefit from, he says, a lottery-style bonanza last year when the price of oil soared. They should pay a global windfall tax to help poorer nations combat climate change. I mean, I think this is absolute nonsense, lunacy from Gordon Brown, but I'm guessing you agree with him.
You like the idea that Saudi Arabia should have a massive windfall. Who's paying that windfall? It's all the people around the world who are paying higher energy bills, including people in the UK. Why should Saudi Arabia, because the price of oil has risen, for no reason for anything to do with it, get this massive windfall?
Because they're lucky enough to be a desert with a bunch of oil underneath it.
And what about all the unlucky countries who are suffering the effects of climate change because without having caused
Well, they're not suffering the effects of climate change. There's no evidence of that.
Julia, are you seriously telling somebody in Niger, in West Africa, that because the temperatures have risen over recent years and their rains don't fall and therefore they can't grow enough food and therefore they're migrating, that climate change has nothing to do with that? That's where the money would go. Yes. Gordon Brown is proposing that the money would go from the richest countries to some of the poorest to help them cope.
But the reality is life is unfair. Some countries have got wonderful natural resources, some countries don't. One of the reasons why the oil price, one of the reasons the oil prices went up is because these so-called allies like Saudi Arabia quite happily limited the supply of oil at a time to create that global demand and push the price up.
And you're happy about that, are you?
No, I think it's outrageous that we still sell weapons to these countries when they're clearly not our friends.
That's irrelevant. the proposal is nothing to do with weapons. It's about saying if countries have received this massive windfall, literally $1 trillion worth of windfall in 1 year.
Because we let them, but I don't think we should tax them extra. It's not our business to go around putting taxes on other countries. Michael, we have to leave it there. We are done over time. Michael Jacobs.